Hello my friends, my name is Mike Maher. I'm a breathwork coach and instructor, and I also run this podcast on Take a Deep Breath. And today I have a lovely human being, Tara, who has the YouTube channel Be Light TT, which is transformative therapy. We were connecting on Instagram. She's an Oxygen Advantage instructor. I'm an Oxygen Advantage instructor. And she had a video that blew up a little while ago all about nasal nitric oxide. And so I've seen her kind of on YouTube a few times. It was lovely that we got to connect. So we'll talk a lot about the breath, but in this podcast, we also talk about something which I'm still learning about, which fascinates me, which is myofunctional therapy. In particular, the mouth. I got a really tight jaw. I've worked on it for years. It's a lot better, but I still need to do things. She does a lot of body work, a lot of massage, and something cool again that I'm just getting into, just on the periphery of learning about, is tuning forks. So she does tuning fork therapy. Sounds like I'm swearing, doesn't it? Tuning FORK therapy as well. Different frequencies. Now the rumor is that there's a few books coming out soon about the scientific benefits of sound healing, so it couldn't be a better time to be talking about tuning forks and binaural beats and all that jazz. And so we have a lovely conversation, and you should absolutely go and check her out on YouTube. I'm going to link to all of her stuff. Right now she has like breath challenges on there. I think you can work with her one-on-one, and what you'll I think see straight away is just a great energy, just a lovely human trying to help people breathe better, feel better. I really just aligned with her values straight away, so I hope you enjoy listening to Tara and you feel encouraged to check out some of her stuff as well, because she's ace. Just a couple of bits from me. Join the thousands of people that have already downloaded my free 7 Essentials PDF. I'm going to leave it up for a bit longer, so if you want that, you can click on the link below. It's completely free, and I'll send you a PDF straight away. It has 7 exercises, tells you the what, the why, and the how, and I've tried to put what I think are the most essential ones for like sleep, focus, unblocking your nose, and a host of other things as well. And so you get to understand what they're doing a little bit and how and why, and then you click on the link and you can watch or listen to the video, all free. Gets you on my email list as well, which means you're the first to know as soon as I've got a space for one-to-one coaching. Some people like to work with me one-to-one. I'm building a membership program at the moment as well, so some of us can get together on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, breathe together, learn stuff together. That's going to be really cool. Maybe get some guests involved. So I'm just playing with that at the moment. That's the very early stages. Shouldn't really be talking about that, but I'm very excited. And you get to hear about discounts on events. So I have another breathwork thing called Airheads with the wonderful Tom Granger, and we're putting all these different breathwork events and courses and stuff. So if you like breathwork, if you like to improve your mental health, if you'd like to improve your physical health, if you're looking at ways to be well, reduce anxiety and stress, then get that 7 Essentials breathing exercises PDF, booklet, whatever you want to call it, and be kept up to date on all the other good stuff that's happening. So here is Tara. I hope you enjoy the podcast, and I'll see you afterwards. Cheers. Tara, welcome to Take a Deep Breath podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, Mike. Thanks so much for having me on. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good, very good. How did you get involved with breathwork? How did you get involved with the OA? I'd love to hear a bit about what your journey's been to get you. So you mentioned the performing arts as well. So just give us a bit about you, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I was always into holistic health since I was a teenager. It was always a part of my journey. My dad had me in the gym when I was like 10 years old. So I was always into fitness. We've always had some digestive stuff in my family, so I was really into this idea of food healing from a young age, and nutrition and proper eating, using food as medicine. And so I am maybe unusual in that I'm not someone who kind of transitioned out of a corporate job into health and wellness. It's been my entire life. I've really devoted probably about 20 years or more now to this type of work and lots of different modalities. But what started me on my journey was really massive digestive issues, just like debilitating gut stuff, which was also causing hormonal imbalance, lots of anxiety, really poor self-esteem. I was really struggling with my mental health, lots of depression. But I was always seeking answers. So it really led me on that path. I had a lot of failures with sort of the standard modern medical establishment. It just didn't help me. It didn't serve me. And so I had to find answers in other ways. I think my performance background helps me because I have a lot of body awareness, which is useful. So I could really, I feel like I was really cultivating that interoception from a young age and understanding what's working for me, what's not working for me. And that really guided me to take certain paths. So my first kind of career in proper health and wellness was as a massage therapist. So that's kind of been my bread and butter for a long time. I was a personal trainer and a massage therapist for a long time. And in doing that work, breathing is always like on the edges. It's always on the periphery, right? You're working on people's abdominal area. You're literally working on the respiratory diaphragm. You're opening up the rib cage. You're doing all these things that are helping them to breathe better and that are related to their breath, their breathing. But that's not the lens you're looking through, right? You're kind of coming at that work from a different lens. And so I got to a point where I was like, there's something with this breathing. What is going on with this breathing? And I was constantly seeking answers. I constantly wanted to know more. And so I was like doing Qigong. I was doing yoga. I was doing a lot more kind of just formal anatomy and biomechanics work around the diaphragm itself. And yet I still felt like I had these gaps in my knowledge. I was like, no one's really explaining how this works, why it works in the body, how to modulate the breath in different ways to actually elicit a different response. And so it's been a long time. I was hunting for a very long time. And my first formal entry into proper breath work, Mike, was actually not Oxygen Advantage. It was much more conscious connected breathing. So I don't necessarily like to name this particular breath work because I have some criticism about it, but I did devote many years to that practice where I was guiding people through this hyperventilation technique, and it was really stimulating the stress response and really digging into the emotional wounds and the trauma, and people were having these massive emotional outbursts in my office, a lot of screaming, a lot of anger, a lot of grief coming up. And that work can be very beautiful, very cathartic for people. And I've also had a lot of cathartic experiences. But I still, even when I was facilitating that work, I still felt like there was this dark spot, this lack of like really understanding. I felt like I was walking people through the motions, but I was like, how is this working? Why is this working? And it was also like, I couldn't customize it to different people. You know, it was like I had one kind of routine that I was doing, and if it didn't work for them, I was like, oh, okay, sorry, we tried, you know, like it wasn't that functional. And so finally, I found sort of Buteyko breathing and Oxygen Advantage work. And that just was such a perfect fit for me because I was coming from this anatomy and physiology paradigm for my whole profession. You know, like I was teaching anatomy and physiology, and I had more of that biomechanical background. And so the work of Oxygen Advantage and Buteyko just made so much sense to me because it has that real scientific and physiological foundation, right? So when I found that, I really never turned back. I felt like someone removed the blindfold after decades of hunting. You know, I was like, oh my God, this is how it works. This is why it works. And the beauty of, I kind of refer to that as more functional daily breathing, right? Not breath work so much, but how are we breathing every day, 24 hours a day, right? How are we breathing during our other activities? It's so powerful. I just lost my thought.
How you got into it and why the Oxygen Advantage. I think you've done a great job of explaining that. I wanted to ask you actually, if you don't mind, if I can pause for a second actually, because I'm very interested in the biomechanics. So as a physical therapist and something that's got, what can people do that have got like gut sucking or they've got very tight ribs? And I broke a rib years ago. So when I've had work done, people say, I can feel that rib's not moving.
Yeah.
What can we do on ourselves to kind of get some flexibility there?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tricky. You know, honestly, when there's really major past trauma like that with scar tissue, it's awesome if you can work with a practitioner. You know, I like to empower people to do as much as they can for themselves when they can. But with that type of thing that's so specific, especially if you cracked a lower rib, Mike, right? Think about it. It's like also impacting the liver and the gallbladder. It's impacting those organs that are lying under there. It's impacting the lungs, obviously. And all of that fascial tissue, if you look at it, you know, it's like the diaphragm connects into the pericardium. It surrounds the heart. It surrounds the pleura of the lungs. It comes up into the throat, into the tongue. You know, it's like very much everything is connected. So you've got one small break here, and then it just trickles out over time, kind of affecting everything when it's not addressed. So I do think in the acute stage, when you're first dealing with scar tissue like that, it's so important to try to find a practitioner you can actually work with. But if that's not an option for you, I think self-massage is very useful. And I think that people just need to know that they can go there. You know, so sometimes I put videos on my YouTube channel, which are like, we're digging into the organs. We're trying to get under the ribs. We're trying to pull the ribs apart. You know, we're moving the viscera all around. I think because this area is something that we protect so much, right? We go into fetal position. It's the very yin position, and we want to guard it and protect ourselves. People don't know that they can really address those areas. They think they're untouchable. They think you can't ever touch them. But there's so much value to going into this really sensitive area. So I like to teach self-massage, really, is the easiest answer. Really kind of physically mobilizing the ribs in different ways, really moving the viscera around. And then I would always coach people to breathe while they're doing that to get more expansion. And I think, I mean, a yoga practice can be very useful, but you don't even have to do a formal asana practice. Sometimes just getting on the floor and kind of maybe putting a pillow or a ball to open up the rib cage and really just creating more breath awareness. Can you breathe into just the right side of your rib cage? Can you breathe just into the left side of your rib cage? Can you get on all fours and really get the posterior rib cage to expand and deflate, you know? Bringing movement and sensation and awareness to these areas that we're never aware of during the day. You know, part of the reason that people don't have good awareness to this area is because the proprioception is not intense there, right? So if you looked at, they call it the homunculus of the brain, right? The little man of the brain, who kind of shows how much sensory input is devoted to certain areas of the body and how much motor input is coming from certain parts of the brain. And if you look at that, most of our sensory input is coming through the tongue, through the eyes, through the ears, through the hands, through the feet. You know, this area is not giving a lot of attention to the brain. So it's nobody's fault that we don't have good awareness here. So with all my students, the first step always is breath awareness, just creating a mental map of this area. Can you actually feel expansion there? Because if you can't feel it, you're not going to achieve it, right? So awareness is always the first step. And then if it's stuck, you know, some of my students do really well with these like little breathalyzer. I don't think that's the right word. These breathicizer, these breathing like tools, right? Sometimes those can be really useful if you need a little something. And I'm also a big fan of just putting a band or a belt around the rib cage, just getting that, again, that proprioceptive feedback. Can you feel the front of your ribs, the side of your ribs, the back of the ribs? I think it's so important. When you create more awareness, you can create more movement, and that creates more function.
Just a reminder, I am a breathwork coach and I take on a very small number of clients each month. If you are interested in working one-on-one with me, where we'll explore how breathwork can really help you achieve your goals, a bespoke plan built from the ground up with me, using my knowledge of 100 plus podcasts with the world's greatest breathwork experts, pulling together, combining all the dots from everything I've learned from all these podcast conversations, all the books that I've read, all the study that I've done, to give you a bespoke plan where you can really harness the breath to help you hit your own personal goals. Then the link is down below for a free 30-minute Zoom. Come on Zoom, let's have a chat and see if it's a good fit for you. Okay, back with the podcast.
Love it. And with the belt, is that belt tight or is it loose? Do you put it on tight or is there different stages to how it works?
I don't like it too tight. You don't want to be fighting it too much, right? You want the body to win ultimately. You're not trying to corset yourself down. That creates more restriction, right? So I usually get, sometimes you see those looped, sorry, I don't have the right words today, like those physio bands, right? Those elastic bands. I actually like those better than something like a strict belt. So something that has some elastic give where you can actually feel the expansion. Sometimes I'll just take my bathrobe even and just hold it around myself, and I'll use my upper body. And then as I'm breathing, I let my ribs win. And then as I'm exhaling, I let the belt win, and I really cinch it down around my rib cage so I can really feel that around my whole rib.
I'm actually working with the rib stand. So as you're kind of expanding, you're putting a bit more pressure into it and like give you. Oh, that's really interesting, because the inspiratory extra muscle training that I do is all with like an AeroFit or one of those devices, which is create the resistance on the airflow. I haven't done much with the physical body, so that's really interesting actually. Okay, and what would be like a good exercise to do that? Like a couple of minutes? I know it varies person to person.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple minutes, 2-3 minutes, a couple times a day, depending on what you're trying to solve. I think small doses more often throughout the day are more effective than like one big session during the week, right? It's just about practicing, just dropping in more often during the day. You know, in the oxygen advantage, we do this all the time, but I'm a big fan of just getting the hands on the ribs, you know, like just feel your body and push your hands, you know, it's so simple, and then you don't need any equipment at all. Yes. Anything we can do that doesn't require equipment is always useful, because compliance is always the issue.
Let's strip it back to nature and let's just keep it super simple. Yeah, I'm with you there 100%. I love that. Cool. So you mentioned fascia. I'm a bit obsessed with fascia. I know very little about it. The way somebody described it to me was like, it's like when you peel an orange, you left with that white stuff that's like all in your body, which I thought was like a nice description. Please tell me more about what it is, how we can, I say what I'm very interested in, how we can stretch it, because I've got like a tongue tie.
Oh yeah.
Forward. And I'm really scared to have the snip done. I need to probably have it done at some point, but I'm 14 now, so I'm very scared to have the snip done, because you've got to learn to talk again. You might have a bleed out. It's all these like scary things, yeah. So we had my son's tongue done straight away. It was 2 seconds.
It was tied, really?
I said mine. So we went to the lady. It was very painless process. He went straight on to Nina for feeding afterwards. Blood stopped almost instantly. I was like, I really wish I'd had that done to me when I was a baby, because I apparently need like general anesthetic now and all this sort of stuff, because there's loads of blood vessels. Anyway, so what can we do to stretch the fascia? What is the fascia? How can we work with it? A lot of stuff there. If you could shed some light on that, that'd be useful.
Yeah, I think a better image than the orange peel is, I mean, I know my vegetarians get upset when we talk about this, but if you do actually eat meat, I mean, the anatomy is the same, right? Like if you have a piece of chicken or steak at home, that white film that is attached to the raw meat, that is the fascia of the chicken or the cow. So you can see it's very thin like that, right? And it's very water-based, right? It should be a predominantly watery matrix. I mean, this is why we say our body is, 75% water or more. The fascia is really like 75, 80% water. You want it to be anyway. When the fascia gets dehydrated, when we're not taking in enough water or not absorbing that water, that's when you start to have problems, because we literally call it the endless web, right? It literally surrounds and connects everything. So it's around each and every muscle fiber, each and every cell, each and every bone, right? It creates your periosteum, that outer coating of your bone. It creates all the outer coatings of your organs. It creates all the outer coatings of all the muscular bundles. And it connects throughout the entire body. So if the fascia is dehydrated, for example, all your hair follicles, your sweat glands, your nerve receptors, your peripheral sensory receptors, everything is traveling through that connective tissue. So if things start to dehydrate and compress, now all these nerve endings are getting compressed. All of these cells are getting compressed, and you start to have dysfunction over time. It usually leads to a lot of chronic pain, nagging pain. Usually people have some kind of restriction pattern, right? Where it's like you've always got that pain in like the right shoulder blade or something, right? Or you probably get stuff in the posterior neck because you've got this little bit of a forward head motion, right? So it's how can we break that up? Because it's really contributing to our chronic pain, which also is going to affect energy levels, obviously, because we're limiting blood flow, we're limiting oxygen delivery. Now the mitochondria are not functioning well. It's always this trickle-down effect that impacts the entire body. So fascia is a little different than traditional, in terms of stretching. It's a little bit different than how you would stretch a muscle. Because of the connections through the body, you have to get all the movements just right to really put the drag on those fibers in the right orientation. So there is something called myofascial stretching. I actually don't guide people through that, but I have lots of colleagues who can. So if your audience is interested, I can also refer out to that. But it's different when you think about sort of the static stretching that we all grew up doing, where you're just like holding, right? It's very different. That's like a muscular stretch. Are you going to impact the fascia a little bit? Yeah, but the fascia needs a little bit of a different approach. If you go in too fast or too hard, it's going to respond by contracting, So you have to go in a little bit more gently, and it has to always be according to this very specific orientation. But the fascia is very particular. I mean, you can stretch every part of your fascia in very specific ways. It's not necessarily this global stretch and you did your job. You can be very, very specific with it, which is super interesting. In terms of something like a tongue tie, you basically have too much connective tissue under your tongue, right? That's holding it down, and you're feeling it in your own body. It's interesting because people don't think about their tongue unless there's a problem, right? Most of us don't think about anything unless there's a problem, and we start to have pain or symptoms. And so what kind of symptoms are you getting, Mike? So you can actually feel that it's kind of pulling your head forward a little bit.
So interestingly, when I met my partner on our first date, she went back to her friend. She goes, "Nice guy, but really bad posture." And I was 35, and nobody had ever said I had bad posture for 35 years. And so I was like this before. And I was working on laptops, and so I spent the last sort of 5-6 years really working on it. But the more that I've worked on sitting up straight, the more that I can now feel the pressure. Because when you're like that, you don't feel the pressure because that's where my body wants to be. But when I'm now trying to do this, it's like, oh, I could feel so tight here, and
yeah. I mean, so that is the classic. It's interesting that you didn't notice it for 35 years. Your body just went into compensation around the dysfunction, right? And so that's what happens to us. And so it's interesting. For you, it's going to be tricky. Are you doing any sorts of tongue mobility exercises at all? You can't. How limited is your tongue tie? Can we actually breathe? Oh, wow. Yeah.
I think it's got a slightly different name because it's actually right at the front of the tongue. It's tied down. So there's not any space.
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky. So for you, I mean, honestly, I would consider I'm not someone who promotes these surgeries that often, but for you, I would consider snipping only if you're doing it in conjunction with a good orofacial myofunctional therapist. You have to do the exercises to re-strengthen and retrain your tongue and get that neuromuscular connection back in, because it's going to be flailing. You're going to feel very bizarre in the beginning, right?
Yeah. 40 years of never knowing what it's like, and when I see people stick the tongues out, I was like, how can you do that? It just blows my mind.
So have you ever gotten body work related to this area though, besides just going into the shoulders and the neck? Have you had any kind of intraoral or kind of?
No.
So I think when it comes to the tongue tie, until you get it snipped, there are I started to think about maybe adding this to my YouTube channel. It's just doing kind of intraoral work for people, because I do think there is benefit. It sounds so odd, and it's another one of those places that people don't think to go into and think they can't go into. There are so many muscles making up the tongue and the floor of the mouth. And so even if you're limited in the front, which is going to be a big problem for you, you can start to release the back of the tongue, the middle of the tongue, the floor of the mouth, and it might help you to get a little bit more of this neutral head position, maybe, I mean, the bigger issue for you is you can't make contact on the roof of your mouth. Is that the problem?
No, that's actually one thing that's not been such a problem. So what happens is my tongue rests forward, so the tip of my tongue's touching the bottom of my teeth, and it is actually on the roof of my mouth. So I've actually got a pretty good roof of my mouth touch. It's just the whole thing's pulled forward.
Yeah, I can feel it. Yeah, I mean, it's a little tricky because there's an actual structural issue with you that needs to be addressed, right? So we always have to consider, is it a functional disruption or an actual structural disruption? And if it's a true structural issue, something more serious, there needs to usually be a more serious intervention before these other things actually work and stick. If it's not a structural thing, if it's just a functional, something's a little bit off, that can usually be corrected a little bit more easily. But yeah, I feel for you.
So not only am I the host of this podcast and I put out all these YouTube videos, I am a breathwork coach. That's what I do most of my time. And you can apply to work with me one-on-one. I've interviewed now 100 of the world's top experts in breath, wellness, yogis, authors, and I've pulled together the dots, and I can see the toolkits and the tools that we need to apply for different goals. So whether your goal is anxiety reduction, stress reduction, increased focus, increased athletic performance, improving heart rate variability, lowering blood pressure, and so many other things, you can click below, get a free 30-minute Zoom with me, and let's have a chat and see if it would be a good fit for us working together. And I look forward to speaking to some of you on Zoom. It's my absolute passion working one-on-one. Get immediate feedback, get access to me on WhatsApp so you can text me each day when you've done the exercises. I'm sending you podcast links and Zooms and bespoke exercises just for you. And my clients absolutely love it. In fact, most times I say, we want you because you've interviewed everybody and we know that you look at breath work as a whole. So if that's of interest to you, the link is down below. Now back on with the Breathcast. Cheers.
Talk me through actually, because I'm still playing. Once I saw what happened to my son, I was like, I don't know that bad actually. Maybe I could do that. So maybe I'll revisit that. Actually, just one last thing on my function. Any advice for people with like really tight jaws? Now, again, for me, maybe it's to do with the tongue. But like here is so much tension, and so I've tried to massage it. And interesting, I heard a podcast with somebody else a long time ago, and they were saying that this is maybe a little bit off topic, but they found a pressure point, and as they touched it, the person just started to cry. There was like some tension there. But anything about the jaw, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, and the jaw. So think about why people clench their jaw. So it could be a sort of postural distortion like you're going through, but more often than not, it's when we're angry and we're trying to suppress anger, or there's a lot of grief that we don't know how to process, or we're just so stressed and we're just like clenching somewhere, right? So whatever your beliefs are, but I can tell you from being a body worker for a couple of decades that you definitely hold your issues in your tissues, and you get a lot of emotional releases when you start to release clenched, constricted tension that's been there for a long time, especially if the person's not even aware of it. If you go into an area and they didn't even know they were holding there and you finally unleash it, a lot can come up for people. So jaw, I really associate with suppressed anger, suppressed grief overwhelmingly, and frustration, frustration, irritation, aggravation, that chronic stress. We really clench here. So if it's not a sort of postural issue like what you're going through with the tongue position, a lot of self-massage. So I have a lot of jaw release videos on my YouTube channel, actually, because I think this is a common issue and very much related to airway health also, right? If we're clenching, the tongue's also not in a good position, and it doesn't optimize nasal breathing, and it can also close off the throat in the back. And it also drives us into that stress response. And if we're constantly in our sympathetic response, we're never really going to get down-regulated and get all those nourishing, yummy signals that come from the parasympathetic response, right? That feeling of safety and relaxation and good sleep and good digestion. So this can be a big problem. I don't know how far we want to go into it. You want to do jaw release exercises today? What are we doing? So I always like to start with the ears, actually. So talking about fascia, right? Everything is interconnected, right? My toe, like the bottom of my big toe is connected to my eyebrows, right? But so that one's harder for people to get their minds around. But if I told you that your ear is connected to this jaw joint, maybe that makes a little more sense. They're so proximal, right? They're so close to each other. So I like using the ears because they're like little handles on your head. You can get a really good handle on them. So when any appendage that's like sticking off, you can always use it to get a fascial drag through the body. So I usually just have people kind of grab their ears. I put the thumb behind it, and we can start by just gently clenching and dragging both ears away from the skull. So you just pull out. So you should immediately feel it pull into the jaw joint. And then to even work with that more, I like to open and close my jaw while I'm doing this. So and try to sit up tall. I know it's hard. Good. Try to get the shoulders down. So your most beautiful posture that you can achieve while we're doing our work. And if you lose your grip on your ears, you can re-clench. So I'm just grabbing the whole ear, and again, I'm pulling, I'm dragging. I'm not sliding off the ear. I'm using the ear as a handle to pull on that fascia of my scalp and my jaw. And I'm using the actual mandible to create some range of motion through that joint. And you should feel it start to open.
Yeah.
And you should start to feel it kind of uncoil through the TMJ, through the temporomandibular joint right away. So that's something very simple people can do anywhere. You don't look like too big of a weirdo with that one. But and you should feel right away. Like there's usually a pretty strong opening with that. I actually like to go into the ear also. You have to make sure your ears are clean. So this is just external cartilage and tissue, right? If you go into the ear hole, now you can feel all your cranial bones, right? You're in contact with the facial bones and the cranial bones, and you can start to create some slight movement. You're not moving your cranial bones that much, but it starts to just release some pressure. So I'll actually get my second finger in with a little bit of inward pressure, and I'll like push straight up into the temporal bone. So I put, So I'm in this orientation, and I feel the bone, I feel the bone and I'm pushing straight towards the ceiling. And again, I always like to add in the range of motion. And again, try to get the shoulders down. I really love the way this one feels. And you can do kind of all 4 corners inside the ear hole. So then you can turn and push it straight back. So I turn my fingers this way and I push straight back into the bone. And the same thing. I just keep adding some range of motion.
Well, that opens my ear up a little bit.
Yeah. So if you also have throat issues or you get ear infections or you have a hard time regulating pressure, like my bones are more collapsed on my left side. And so that left eustachian tube has a harder time controlling pressure in my left ear. And so I really feel this one. And you can go in all 4 directions. You can go down, you can go front, and you can work through the entire ear. Just even massaging the ears, pulling on the ears, starts to release a lot of general tension through the face and through the jaw. And then some of the other things that your friend already showed you of just direct pressure. I mean, we can really go into it. So if someone used to come to my office with TMJ issues, I mean, I could spend a whole hour just on their jaw. There's a lot you can do. And because people have so much emotional holding there, you have to take your time going in layer by layer. If you go in too fast, they'll just clench up and now you're defeating the purpose of the session. So yeah, it's intense, but the jaw is a great thing to release for airway health, for nervous system regulation, for general tension, and for posture, for sure.
That's really nice. I did some free diving last year and I had a lot of problems with this ear. The eustachian tube.
Me too.
It's just opened up actually a little bit just doing that as well. I tell you what I do as well. I use the chewing gum that's mentioned in the book Breath.
Where's the what you said?
Chewing gum for heat.
Oh, the chewing gum. Oh, that mastic gum stuff?
Yeah, it's disgusting. It's really disgusting. It takes about an hour to warm it up. But it's like chewing like concrete. Is there any benefit to that? Because here's my theory: is like our ancestors would chew like 8 hours a day, and we eat smoothies now. Based on the book Breath by James Nestor. It's like I hardly chew anything these days. So I kind of feel like when I use this, it gets some of the tension out of my jaw because it's being like with a dog, for example. You give a dog a chew toy because it needs to work its jaw. We don't do the same thing for ourselves. So this is like my chew toy. So any truth to that?
I haven't played around with it much myself, Mike, so I don't want to misspeak about it. I like the idea of it. And I do think that not chewing enough from young kids has affected our facial development for sure. I mean, I suffer too. My whole family, we have very small mouths. I don't have a tongue tie, but my tongue is too big for my mouth. You can see the teeth marks all across my tongue. And so I've also been experimenting with, I had a palate expander in as an adult a few years ago, trying to open it up. My orthodontist thought it was miraculous, the change. And I was like, really? It moved like this much, but she was like, this is amazing. It's tougher for adults. It's just tougher, the bones are more fixed. It takes more effort. It takes more work. I think all these little tools can help. It depends how severe your symptoms are, honestly.
Yes. Yeah. You've got the dude near you, Belfour, Dr. Belfour. Have you come across this guy? Yeah.
He's right in New York City. I haven't worked with him, but I actually thought, I wish I had known about that homeo block earlier. I chose a different device, but when I read on his device, it makes more sense to me. And I actually think it could be more beneficial than the one that I did. I feel like adults are getting more expansion with his device than the one I decided to go with. I just didn't know at the time. I wasn't really into the breathwork field at the time I was doing that palate experiment for myself. I just had a feeling. I was like, if I can get more room in my mouth, it's going to have a global effect on my body. I just knew it. And now that I'm in the breath world, I'm like, oh my God, I was on the right track, but I didn't do all the steps I needed to do.
Sure.
No.
We're all learning our way. That's the wonderful thing. This stuff was about 50 years ago.
Exactly.
I'm very keen to talk about the gut because you mentioned you healed the guts a little bit. Now, interestingly, me and my whole family have all suffered with gut issues, and there might be something to do with breastfeeding there and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And so, and my girlfriend's from Poland. When we went traveling, we went all across Southeast Asia. She can eat anything, and she's fine. And she had a lot of like kefir in her diet and raw cabbage, and when she was growing up. So really good fermented vegetables. I just need to think about going abroad, and I'm in the toilet for like 3 days. I'm not even joking. It's ridiculous. So I do want to do that whole gut testing thing at some point, but I would love to know a bit about that journey, if you don't mind sharing with it, and any practical tips you can give us. I know there's the whole like eat whole foods and all that sort of, but maybe there's another layer you can give us on that one.
Yeah, it's so complex. The gut stuff is such an epidemic because we're like up against the worst odds every day with the environmental toxicity, right? Like the body just has to take on such a massive load of toxins every day and process them. Yeah. So if there's any dysfunction in the organs, it's just like you're just building layer on top of layer that you just cannot eliminate, So it's tough. The first step is clean up your immediate environment as much as you can, right? The things that you can control, try to control them. So, like that means getting a really good water filtration system. That means trying to only eat the whole foods, make them organic when you can, or from local farms when you can, all of those practical things for sure. In terms of breathing, let's say, this was the piece that came to me very late in my journey, because I was much more focused on what am I eating? How am I exercising? I was more focused on the physical things. But breathing is something you control every part of the day. And I think the nervous system dysregulation is such a huge part of gut debilitation, of gut issues, right? When we can't really get into parasympathetic mode, it's just, we don't stand a chance, right? So, I always had very irregular hours, which doesn't help. I used to, the bulk of my practice was when most people were getting out of work. So I was kind of like a shift worker where I was working mostly at night. And because of the history of gut stuff, if I eat, I don't digest well, so I get so tired. So I was like starving myself for most of the day. And then I get home at 9 or 10 at night and I'm like shoveling food in my face over the sink, It's the opposite of what a holistic health practitioner should be doing. And you're just looking at yourself like, what am I doing? I know better. Why am I doing this? So I think what's critical is, I think circadian rhythm plays a huge role, right? I think it's so critical if we can totally shift our sleep cycle and improve our sleep cycle and eat and move in conjunction with what's happening with our sun situation, with the light during the day, it's huge. So if you can kind of get up with the sun, whatever that is for you, and if you're timing your meals and your movement and more of your activity when it's bright outside, and then you're really truly shutting down at night instead of infiltrating your eyes with all this artificial light, I think that plays a huge role in how the gut microbes time themselves, right? Because those microbes also came out of the soil. So they have a direct link with the microbes that are still in the soil, and they're reacting to daylight and moonlight, right? Like all these things in our body, the microbes, the parasites, even everything that we are taking into our body and is staying in there, it's also reacting to sun and moon. It also has that circadian rhythm. So it's on that cycle whether we are or not, right? So now there's always this like conflicting things going on inside the body. So I think circadian rhythm is huge. If you can fix your sleep, it's huge. Yes. I think if you can really shut off eating 3 hours before bedtime, that's really important. Mm-hmm. And then the breathing. So what I do nowadays is so simple. We know all these techniques, right, Mike? But I think we all still in our own personal practice kind of default to 1 or 2 that we use all the time, right? So I think simple is better. I love a 4-6 cadence. I love breathing in through the nose for 4 and exhaling through the nose for 6. I think it works so fast. It's really easy to teach people. It's really easy to implement. And it operates very quickly. It hacks into that physiological response and that nervous system response so quickly. So I might be sitting at the table already, and I'll just take 1 minute even of breathing in for 4 and out for 6. 5 breaths. It takes no time at all. And it just starts to send that signal to your body. Okay, you're safe. There's nothing chasing you. You can let go of the day. You can let go of the stress. Like, let's prepare to eat this meal and actually digest it and absorb it. Simple things. I talk to my gut health expert friends, and before they even go like the probiotic route or anything like that, it's these simple, like, what are you doing with your lifestyle around your eating time? Are you chewing your food? Nobody chews their food. We put it in our mouth and we swallow it whole. So it's just taking the time to really chew arduously, like way more than you think you should. Get the digestive enzymes starting in the mouth. eating slowly, really eating mindfully, as they say, right? Don't have a horror movie on next to the dinner table, like create a sacred space around your eating. It makes a huge difference, right? When you can control where your nervous system is on that spectrum of super stressed or super relaxed, you want it over here when you're eating, right? And most of us are not. Most of us, I can't tell you how many meals I've had while I'm running to the subway, on the subway car. Okay, I got to get to work. I've done it. It's horrible. So I think simple practices like taking the time to just really sit, down regulate, take 5 or 6 breaths at a slow cadence, like 6 breaths per minute before you eat your meal, really chewing, get the digestion going, and don't have the distractions. Make your meal the thing that you're doing, Don't have an upsetting argument with your partner at the dinner table, like make it precious, make it an emotionally enjoyable experience. And that already is going to solve a lot of the gut problems. That's the simple things that you can do that are totally free, that you have total control over. And, for me, the sleep thing is something I'm still fixing because I'm coming off of a very erratic schedule. And also my boyfriend is a firefighter who's a shift worker, right? So his schedule's all over the place too. So we sleep whenever, we eat whenever. But I think for humans who are diurnal by nature, we are day walkers, right? We're not nocturnal creatures. I think it only makes sense that your eating is aligned with on a better schedule where you're really eating during the daytime, and when it's nighttime, you are shutting down. Most of us just don't know how to shut down. We don't have that practice. We are very practiced in getting into stress. We're very practiced in upregulating. We don't have that active practice of truly relaxing, truly down regulating, truly shutting down. And it is a practice. It seems stupid that we need to practice that, but we do. We're not good at it. And because we're not good at it, we get all these other health problems and we try to associate them with other things. But I think a lot of it is this nervous system dysregulation, this just inability to really get into that parasympathetic state.
I forget who told me this now, but somebody gave me the advice of when it's wonderful advice and I need to hear it back to do it. It's like when you sit at the dinner table, just take a few moments. People say grace and gratitude and all that sort of stuff, but just take a few moments and just breathe slowly before you even start the food. And what you're really waiting for is for the saliva to kick in.
Yeah.
And that's your signal. Okay, I can start eating now. But to get that saliva, you really need to be relaxed.
Yeah.
Breaths. And maybe that's where the grace comes. A lot of these things, these old things, saying grace, sit up straight, shut your mouth, all that jazz, get your elbows off the table, all that stuff comes from somewhere, doesn't it? It's really, really interesting. Just a slight divert as well, because you mentioned your partner's a firefighter. Have you ever seen that video on YouTube about how many steps a firefighter can take when he's got the oxygen mask on? And I think they do mouth versus nose. It's quite an old video. Have you ever seen that?
No, please send it to me. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I'll dig it out. And it's really interesting, actually, because what they're trying to do is say, how they can preserve the oxygen tanks as much as possible. And I think it shows the amount of steps they did on the mouth, and then they did double just by doing nose breathing to consume the same amount of oxygen. Anyway, obviously stuff we know, but just reminded me, I've not seen that video for a while.
Oh, I would love to see that video. Please send it to me. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, that's very interesting. I didn't know you were going to go there with the light and that sort of...
I didn't know I was going to go there either. But
no, I really like that. That's really, really interesting because... I don't know if you're a fan of Andrew Huberman. It's like our God now, isn't he? He's the God of all these things, this guy. And he also talks a lot about daylight. So that's changed my life up a lot. And getting the daylight in first thing. But I hadn't thought about the microbes in my body. That's really interesting. Didn't you practice the grounding? You ever done the earthing or the grounding stuff? You ever looked into that?
Yeah, I mean, not scientifically. It's just nice to get your feet on the ground, right? But it's interesting. So the environment I'm in right now, how honest do we want to be on this podcast? So, it's interesting. I'm happy to be out of the city, but I don't know that the suburbs are the solution for me. So I see a lot of strange things happening in this place where I am originally from. For example, everyone has to have these pristine green lawns that are completely functionless and unsustainable. So we are trying to cultivate this lawn that is completely unnatural to this part of the world, right? It's a grass that doesn't naturally grow here. So that's number one. So in order to maintain it, it requires a ton of pesticides. People are spraying stuff all the time. It also requires copious amounts of water, which is absurd. When you could pull the whole thing out and just plant something native and it would look beautiful, it would require less money, less maintenance, and you could actually walk on it. The point being, my mom is obsessed with killing everything. So she's always spraying the lawn, and I can't go out and ground because I don't want to walk in the pesticide-riddled lawn. So it's ironic to me that I left the city to find more nature, but I'm actually being like, there's like a force field that's preventing me from actually enjoying that nature directly around the house. This is a personal frustration I'm experiencing in the suburbs, and I'm thinking of starting a movement to shift everyone's mentality about what it means to actually have a lawn.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, I think you guys are a bit further ahead. We do have some of that culture here. There's like companies that'll come and sort you. Oh, because we've got a German Shepherd, it looks like World War I outside. There's just holes everywhere. She just loves digging. So we actually put a fence up, and she dug under the fence. But anyway. But so that's interesting. We don't use any pesticides, and in the UK they have a lot of what they call hose pipe bans in the summer because we run out of water. So we're not actually allowed to water our grass a lot either, which is obviously a good thing. But makes some people very unhappy because obviously the ground goes. Right. That's really interesting. So we use a grounding sheet on our bed at night as well, and that's plugged in, and that. There's a really good documentary called The Earth In Movie. It's had like 5 million people on YouTube. It's worth checking out. I talked to everyone about this, and there's a lot of science around it as well.
I know there is.
I haven't had a chance to release the podcast with the dude yet, with Clint, but he talks about breathing and grounding and the link between the two, and how our respiratory rate changes when we're grounded versus non-grounded. So all that stuff was anyway, slight detail. But I think you need to stop that movement, get the pesticides off. Let's get a natural earthing bed, get everyone in the bare feet.
Like, that's what's better than actually being on the actual earth. I mean, I think it's cool that we have these blankets. My cousin actually uses one and she loves it. And I know a lot of people who use them and feel a huge impact. What's the biggest impact you feel on yourself, Mike, with that?
Interestingly, I haven't actually felt much impact, but I was already doing a lot of grounding. So it's like, I don't know, it's like, you take the multivit and you think, you expect to feel like the Hulk the next day. You don't feel any different. So there is that going on, but it's really annoying actually, because in some areas I'm super sensitive to things. So like I said, I talk about my gut, I'm super sensitive. But another example, I've got a friend that he's ultra sensitive to everything. Like he can't even have like teamwork. He gets like inflamed from it. Yeah. So he feels everything. So you put a grounded mat, the next day is like, I feel amazing. And I was like, damn it, I can't. So he's got the ultra set, but that really slows him down in life because there's a lot of things he can't do. Whereas I'm the other way, I don't really feel a lot of this stuff. I just have to trust that it's doing something for me. So I don't know which one's better, because I feel like he's got the better end of the stick. Because okay, there's a lot of stuff he can't do right now, but it's almost like his body's protecting him straight away. Whereas, for example, I could smoke cigarettes and not feel any effects for like 30 years. I don't smoke, obviously breathwork coach, but so it's that balance. Anyway, so I wouldn't say to you, oh my God, I feel like I found Jesus on that mat, but I do feel like it's one of these lovely habits where you forget about it and you don't even need to worry. And I love those sort of habit stacking things, like get up in the morning, don't look at your phone, just go for a walk. I don't think about it now. It's just a habit. I go on the grounded mat, I have my athletic greens or whatever in the morning. So for me, it's always about stacking those wonderful habits and not having to do a lot of heavy lifting in that sense.
Yeah, stacking the habits, and I'm a big believer in the placebo. I mean, we have to be, it's like if you think you're doing something good for you, that neurophysiology also starts to activate in your body. So, I mean, there is something to it for sure.
Definitely. I want to talk to you about tuning forks. Tell me what the hell's going on there, because that's really interesting. Is it something I can do at home? Can you do it on the video? What's it doing?
Hey everybody, I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. I just wanted to ask if you could leave me a quick review. If you're on iTunes or Spotify, a couple of taps of the thumb, leave us a review. It helps other people find the podcast. If you're on YouTube, if you could like, subscribe and share, that would be freaking fantastic. Okay, back on with the podcast. Cheers.
It's so funny, Mike, because I never anticipated that I was ever going to teach anything with tuning forks, but I happened to show it in a video on YouTube once, and that was a nitric oxide video. I really just wanted to, that was me starting to teach about breathing, right? And I mentioned this tuning fork thing. And of course, all of the comments blew up. What is that thing? How do I get it? How do you use it? And I was like, what did I start with this? So it happened kind of organically, where I was like, okay, I guess people are interested in this thing. Let me create a few video series. So there's like 2 separate like video series on my YouTube channels, just how to use this tuning fork on the body. Yeah, tuning forks are interesting. So, I'm an amateur musician too. I play mostly piano, but I see you have a guitar back there. I play guitar a little bit also. So I think there's something very natural to, this will make sense to you immediately, that frequencies impact the body in different ways, right? I think most people can accept that different types of music, different genres of music impact you in different ways. Like that's why people have, workout playlists, because they have the songs that really get them amped up and help them to breathe faster, and they get the heart rate going, right? And then we have our songs that we kind of want to chill out to, and you literally feel your breathing slow down, your heart rate slow down. So I think it's natural to understand that different frequencies can have this physiological impact on the body. I think we also, a lot of people are concerned with EMFs and all these things. Like we're being assaulted by all kinds of frequencies that are invisible to us all day. And, who knows what impact they're having on the body. So I think it makes sense that frequency can affect us in good and bad ways. So the tuning forks are interesting because before COVID anyway, I was getting really much more into sound healing. I was starting to bring more sound components into my body work. So I would work on people doing manual therapy and whatever, and then I would bring in either tuning forks or sound bowls, and I would start to experiment with this mostly for the nervous system regulation. If I had to really sum it up, I would say it's also about getting into that parasympathetic mode, bringing on a sense of safety in the body. How can you create the conditions or the environment so that you feel safe enough to finally heal and resolve whatever is going on in your body? And so for certain people, the sound can be very powerful for that. They don't know how to relax otherwise. They need this external cue that says, okay, it's time to relax. It's okay. You can drop everything. Nothing's chasing you. You can close your eyes and feel safe. There's no danger. There's no threat. For some people, like someone's hands are not enough, or being in a different room is not enough. They need maybe an auditory cue is more effective for them to say like, oh yeah, I really can chill out now. So I think if you dive into the science more, there are specific frequencies that are good for specific things. I think if you look into polyvagal theory a little bit, it's really interesting. Stephen Porges talks about frequencies a lot in terms of, if you think about it more evolutionarily speaking, right? Like those bass sounds, those really deep thumps, those create more of a threat response traditionally, right? Like I always imagine myself in Jurassic Park, right? If you heard that big boom, boom, you're like, oh my God, what's happening, right? So, our auditory nerve, this auditory apparatus is cued into these different frequencies, these different sounds and vibrations in our environment as a safety response, right? Like if we hear a big thump in our environment, you're like, what was that? And now you're peaked, right? You're going into sympathetic, you're going into fight or flight because you might have to run away from something, right? And so in the polyvagal theory, they have something called the safe and sound protocol, and it starts to play with this, inviting in these deeper frequencies again, while you can still feel safe and in control of your environment, right? Because so many of us who are stuck in this nervous system dysregulation, or stuck in either too much sympathetic or in dorsal vagal, in that shutdown response, we need to start to incorporate these other frequencies back into our life. So I think there's a lot of science around how frequencies, especially sound frequencies, can impact the body. The tuning fork is very cool because it's so simple. It's very portable. I have one right here. Now that you mentioned it, I'll just take it out. So it's very portable. You can bring it anywhere. This one with the weights is a weighted tuning fork, which you use on the body. So you're taking in the vibration more than the sound. So it's also very personal. If I strike this right now, you can't even really hear it, right? Like I have it by the mic, but it's not very loud. So this is something you can take with you everywhere, and it's kind of personal to you. Other people aren't going to hear it or be annoyed by it. This is what we call a C128. You can't see it, which means that this vibrates 120 beats per second, right? Oscillations per second. I like this one because I think of it as a very user-friendly fork. I use it for what I said before, nitric oxide release. So there is some science that shows that using this fork on different parts of the body creates a localized nitric oxide release from the endothelium, which is very cool. It's a quick response. Nitric oxide acts and then it disappears, right? The signaling molecule. But it's very cool. If you use this fork on your body all around for an hour, you're getting these little bursts of nitric oxide throughout the body. So I think that's very cool. Part of that then is also bringing the body into more of a parasympathetic state. People have a lot of benefit in terms of keeping a healthier immune response using this thing, again, because of that nervous system regulation aspect. And I've had some people in terms of pain, Mike, I swear to God, like people who have arthritis for decades, sometimes one application of this thing, they're having miraculous. I mean, it's crazy. That's not been my personal experience, but I have some students and some clients where it's literally one application and this joint pain that they've had for decades just resolves. It's very interesting. Jaw pain, the same. I've had some people with long-standing tinnitus where the fork starts to help them readjust the frequency they're hearing in their ear. When they're using it, it starts to diminish that annoying noise in their ear.
Wow.
Weird applications for it. I think it can have an effect on the fascia and the collagen, honestly. My ladies who use this on their face, everyone tells them it looks like they had a facelift. There's weird anecdotal evidence around the fork, right? And I think at the base of it, it's really this nervous system regulation thing. When you feel calm and safe in your body, everything functions more appropriately. I think we look better, we feel better. We go into that more ventral vagal, which is that social interaction response in the body. So I do think it actually makes our face look more appealing, happier, we're better able to interact, we're more heart-centered. So that's why I use these. I also think when you use it on certain spots, especially on the sternum, you were talking about how can I get more movement through the ribs? I think this is another one for bringing more awareness to these areas of the body that we don't have awareness, improving proprioception. And I will tell you that if you hold this fork on the sternum, I truly believe this has a huge impact on HRV. You feel your breathing shift immediately. It slows down immediately. I don't have proof of that because I don't have an HRV monitor. I'm not like a big gadget person. And I haven't actually had one of my people with an HRV monitor use these, but I think it really improves heart rate variability. That's just a personal feeling that I have.
I love it. What you said endothelium? What's that?
Yeah, so the lining of the blood vessels, right? The cells that line the blood vessels, that's where a lot of the nitric oxide gets produced from, right? That's why it has such a powerful response on the vasculature, right?
Is it around each red blood vessel, or is it
inside? Think about the inner lining of them.
Inner lining of the red blood cells is endothelium.
And the blood vessels. So
Vessels they follow. Okay, and then this is releasing them. Okay, that's interesting. And so you're getting like a vasodilation.
Exactly.
If you've got like tightness or something in your shoulder.
Yeah.
It's getting
Yeah, so I think that's the perfect point. I think that's probably why it's assisting with pain, is you're getting rid of that ischemic response where it's like shutting, if there's too much vasoconstriction, now you're not getting blood flow, you're not getting oxygen delivery, you're not getting waste removal. So it's going to also play a big role on the lymphatic vessels, getting them to operate better, and also dilating the blood vessels so you can actually bring oxygen and fresh blood to that area, fresh nutrients to that area. I think that is probably the connection with the pain, for sure.
And how much do they retail for if you wanted to pick them up off Amazon?
Well, so there's a million different.
Yeah.
I am a big believer that this instrument's going to live longer than us, right? Yeah. So I always invest a little bit more in tools like this because I think quality over anything in terms of this. I have seen people get them on Amazon for $15. I don't think the quality is that good. This is a company I really like, Biosonics, only because one of my teachers owns this company, so I really trust the quality of his forks and his integrity around this. But this will probably go about $75.
Okay, that still seems pretty good. If it does 10% of the things you've just mentioned, it's better than getting a couple of pills, isn't it, from the pharmacies?
Yeah, well, and also I want to say I don't have any stake in the game. This is just like something that I twiddle with on my own and that I use with my clients. I do think some people have miraculous, like when people get in touch with me on YouTube and say, I used the fork once and this happened, I'm like, really? Oh my God. Like I've never heard of that happening. This is great. You know, I think that's one of the best parts about YouTube is you have strangers from all over the globe coming together and like really sharing experience. It's so valuable because you learn things that you wouldn't learn even in a small practice in Manhattan. You know, I can only work on so many people. So when people disperse and are working on their own and discovering these things for themselves, it's so fun to share it. It's happening.
It's a lovely job to have, isn't it? Putting some stuff on. It's really nice. And I kind of finish off with like 3 questions, but I'll go back a little bit before we do that. So you've got a nitric oxide video, 1.5 million views, something like that.
1.6 as of this morning.
Sorry, 1.6 million views. What is going on with like nitric oxide on YouTube? Because I have 2, and they were done a while ago, and like last week one went from like 40,000 views to like 140,000 views.
Wow, good for you.
And then it's gone down again. It's just stopped. What is going on here? So I did a little bit digging. There's only a few people talking about nitric oxide. So what's your video about, and why do you think it resonated so much with people?
I think it was a perfect storm of events because, Mike, it was the first video I ever made for YouTube. I had no idea what I was doing. It's a horrendous video, unwatchable. It's unwatchable. Nobody watched it. It's 18 minutes long. I remember that day I shot it. I was so tired. I turned off the camera a million times. I was like, what am I doing? This is stupid. You know, like it's a horrible video, but something just pushed it in the algorithm. The 2 big things I know that pushed it in the algorithm are, so during COVID, it was around the time that India was having like its second huge wave or something like that. Right. And nitric oxide was getting all that buzz around being a natural treatment for upper respiratory infections, because nitric oxide is also an antiviral, an antibacterial, antifungal, right? It has those properties. And that's part of why our nasal nitric oxide is such a protective thing for us and why it's important to breathe nasally in and out, right? So people were looking for natural remedies to deal with this COVID thing. And during that period, you even saw research coming out where they were trying to create nasal sprays that were based on nitric oxide.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's what did it for me. That was one demographic that hit that video. The nasal nitric oxide as a treatment for COVID was like, boom, like people were looking for it. Now, granted, I've made other nitric oxide videos that have like 1,000 views, so I don't know. I couldn't replicate it. I tried, it didn't work. Okay, and then the other one is it's this powerful vasodilator, right? So things like Viagra, that's how they work, through this nitric oxide pathway. So a lot of people who watch that video are older guys with erectile dysfunction, honestly. I mean, it's a big thing. So sexual dysfunction also has a big audience. Yeah. And so, it's just a weird mix. I've got the COVID people and I have the ED people on that video.
I'm able to narrow my viewers down, really. Like I say, I just thought last week, it's like, what the hell? You know, you go into your analytics, like, what the hell was going on? Everything's just shot up. Like, which video is it? And then I was getting loads of comments. I was like, oh, is that one again? So I don't know, maybe somebody published a study. I heard, you know, and I've not looked into this properly, but somebody told me, maybe it was even Patrick McEwen was saying, I think they thought in the past the nasal nitric oxide would go into your lungs and it would go all around the body, and it was like part of the Viagra thing, you know. Whereas I think what they're saying now is it only lasts about 3 or 4 seconds in the lungs, so it's a bronchodilator, and then it's gone. And then, but obviously the slow breathing relaxes all the blood vessels anyway, so you still get that vasodilation in your bedroom area, but it's not necessarily from the nose itself. So that's my kind of understanding of it now.
I would agree with that. I like to separate them too, because we produce nitric oxide in a lot of different areas of the body. So I think of nasal nitric oxide as still a vasodilator, but what you said for these blood vessels of the lungs, right? What's nourishing the lungs? What's nourishing the alveoli? So vasodilator, bronchodilator for sure for the upper respiratory tract, plus the antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal properties. And then the endothelium is the liner of the blood vessels is always, you know, it's like pulsing all day. You should be releasing nitric oxide regularly. And that's why they say exercise really helps, because I think that sheer force of blood being pushed across the blood vessels helps to release nitric oxide. That's my understanding also. Yeah. And then you also have some in the nerve cells as well, which is a sort of different thing. And I actually think too much nitric oxide in this part of the body can be a deficit. You don't necessarily want more is not always better in terms of the nerve cells.
Interesting. Have you ever looked down the route of the foods like beets and beet juice?
Sure.
Yeah. Have you noticed any benefits to that, or do you try and eat those sorts of foods? Kale?
I do naturally anyway, and I do think beets are very powerful for, even if you look into Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine, beets are huge as like the blood replacer, like the blood food, because a lot of those types of traditional medicine, they look at the food and say, what does this look like in the body? And in some cases, it does really match up. Beets look like blood, but they also really do, I think, help to oxygenate the red blood cells. Cool. So it's pretty interesting, yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. I remember, was it Lance Armstrong or somebody, during those and says they were like smashing the beet juice, as well as other things, obviously. Cool. By the way, this has been a nice conversation. Thank you. I've got 3 questions to finish on. I'll have to do another one at some point if I could keep talking to you. Okay, so I've got my 3 cheesy questions at the end just to close us off. So what book would you recommend to people? Or books? You give a couple of examples. And it doesn't necessarily have to be breathwork. It can be something else to do with wellness. But what can, if somebody wanted to go away and read something after this, what would you recommend?
Oh man, I wish you prepped me for this question. I don't have my book list available. I mean, it's so cliche at this point. I really do like breath. I think it's very user-friendly for people, but you've probably gotten that recommendation 5,000 times on your podcast. It depends what they're interested in. There's that book I really like. It's called... Mike, next time give me some warning. I think it's called, you probably know this one. It's like reinvestigating prana, exploring
Restoring prana?
Maybe that's the name, but I like what she does because she digs into the sort of ancient yoga tradition and the pranayama techniques, and she starts to bring in the science and the physiology and the why that is missing from so much of these. I feel like for me on my journey, I got so involved with the yoga practice and I'd be given random pranayama breathing exercises here and there. I didn't know how to implement them on my own. I didn't know what they were doing, why we were doing them. There were so many holes, again, gaps in the knowledge. And so I really like that book for people who are interested in breathing because many of us have had these encounters with breathing techniques, but we're disempowered by them. We don't know how to use them or what they're doing or why we would ever use them. And so I think always bringing in the why is so critical. So her book is really good for that. I also think sort of like there's a short guide to polyvagal theory, which I think is really nice for people. I think it's really fashionable now, but I think it's critical that people understand this spectrum of their nervous system that they're living in every day and really starting to understand better how their nervous system, the quality of their nervous system in any moment really shapes their perception of reality. It really shapes how you show up in the world, what your thought process is, how you're feeling emotionally, mentally, how you're able to interact with others, if you feel safe, if you feel threatened. So I think really having a baseline understanding of nervous system regulation is really an important skill for people. Because I think if you read it, then it helps you to feel it more in your body. You know it exists, and then you're able to feel it better. You know what I mean?
And that's called A Short Guide to Polyvagal Theory?
That's probably not the title, but it is something like that. I'll get you the proper titles of these books in the after notes.
By the time people are watching this, we'll have the links. And I think the first one is Restoring Prana by Robin Rothenberg. We'll clarify and we'll put the links below. Okay. All right. Sorry. We'll prep next time. What would be again, these are cheesy questions. You get stuck on a desert island and you can only bring one breathing technique with you. What will we go with?
Yeah, 4-6 breathing. I just think it's like so easy. It's got a plethora of benefits that are just like, it's like unimaginably magical for how simple it is.
Love it. Love it. Okay, cool. Last question, big one. How would you define what breathwork means? So it's so loaded, there's so many terms to it. What does it mean to you?
Breathwork to me means reestablishing a really profound connection to self, I think. Yeah. Yeah. I think just cultivating just unbelievable internal awareness and really understanding what your body and your physiology needs in any given moment. I think that's the true power of breathwork. It's so empowering. It puts you in the driver's seat where now you're in control of how you're showing up in life, how you're perceiving your reality, and how others are perceiving you.
Yeah, beautiful. Nice. Where can people find you?
Okay. You can find me on my YouTube channel, which I'm taking a pause from, but there's recreation coming this year. That is Be Light TT, so Be Light with 3 T's. You can find me on Instagram at Tara Be Light with 1 T. I'm very inconsistent. And then my website is Be Light TT, so Be Light with 3 T's.com. And I've got lots of freebies on there. There's a new free training coming in the next few weeks, which I'm really excited about. Lots of updates to my boot camp. Everything is growing and getting better and more cohesive and more empowering for people. So lots of fun things.
Love it. Okay, I will make sure that the links are all down below. So everybody watching or listening, you want to take away from any of Tara's websites. I'm the same. I've got different websites, different names. Take a deep breath. There's the Breathcast. The takeadeepbreath.co.uk. It's like, I need a branded expert to come in, just clean all up for me. You know,
I think you're doing an amazing job. And from an outsider's perspective, I think your branding is so on point. Like you're doing an amazing job.
It's pure chaos. Anyway, Tara, thank you, my friend. That was ace. Any last words you want to finish with for us?
I just think for everyone, your audience is pretty savvy to breathwork, but I still think a lot of people are a little bit uncertain about what breathwork is, and they feel a little shy or like it's a little too woo-woo or whatever. And I think just to remind people that very simple changes in your daily practice can have such a profound impact in the quality of your life and the quality of your health. So really, like, even if you just take on one technique and practice it for the next year, and that's the only thing you do, it can be so empowering and so transformative to your health and your fitness and your life.
Love it. What a wonderful way to finish. Thank you so much, my friend. And everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for sticking all the way through to the end. You are a freaking breath hero. You are. I hope you enjoyed Tara. Please check out her YouTube channel, check out her free challenges, and if you want to work with her, you can look at all that good stuff as well. I really am interested in learning this tuning fork stuff. It sounds very interesting. I just want to get a fork and just play with it myself. Please like, subscribe, and share if you're on YouTube. If you are a Spotify, iTunes, or wherever else you listen to podcasts these days, Castbox, is that still a thing? Please leave us a review. That would be ace. It helps other people find the podcast. Maybe you've got somebody in your life that's a little bit stressed, a little bit tired, a little bit, I don't know, not quite themselves. Send them on the podcast. Just say, hey, have a listen to this, or try one of Mike's breathing exercises. Helps grow our community. We've got over 200 free breathing exercises on YouTube. We've got over 100 podcasts now recorded. They're not all out, but they're all recorded. Those of you that want to breathe deeper, you see what I did there, you can apply to work with me one-on-one. I take on a couple of clients a month, so it might be something you're interested in. Link is down below. You could also check out our Airheads course. Very, very quick pitch on this. We got the world's best breathwork instructors together recently, and they all taught a module of this course. James Nestor, Patrick McEwen, Belissa Vranich, Jesse Kuma, Dan Vadinay, Dr. Pepper, I'm running out of names now, Steph Magenta, Pat DeVilly, some of these names you might be familiar with, some maybe you're not. Basically, everybody came and taught a module in what I'm now classing the world's best breathwork course. So links down there as well. It's only getting better. We just keep adding more and more stuff to it. So wherever you are in your breath journey, please have a think about getting that free PDF. If you've already got it, ace, you'll get updates on all the other stuff that's going on. And if you're interested in working with me, then you can apply down below. Thanks again for watching. And if you like that, maybe check out this video here, which is a beautiful breathing exercise. Or if you're hungry for another podcast, you can click here. Thanks so much.